Welcome. I'm sure you saw the title of this video, so why don't we just jump into it. We're going to go through some settings here. So I'm just going to go over all my settings in Apex, kind of tell you what to look out for, what not to worry about, and we're going to show you how to set your stuff up like CoD so that it feels right, because Apex honestly just feels really weird off the bat, and it bothered me until I was able to figure out a solution to the controls issue. So let's run through it real quick. So I'm going to go through gameplay settings, then we'll go to video settings, and then we'll hit controller. Audio we really don't need to worry about, but controller is going to be the bulk of it. So I'll just cover the easy stuff first, and then we'll get into the meat. The first thing you're going to want to look at is going to be crosshair damage feedback. I suggest you turn it off all the way. Essentially it just clutters up your screen when you're shooting people. You're going to know based on the damage numbers that you hit someone, and also I suggest you turn this to stacking. Because it's going to tell you exactly how much damage you've done to someone, and it'll also, based on the color, tell you what kind of shield they have. So the damage feedback really isn't necessary, and the stacking just kind of cleans it up as clean as you can make it, while still giving you all the info that you want. Next is weapon auto cycle on empty. That's really a personal preference thing. I turn it off just because I naturally switch weapons when I realize I'm out of ammo, and I'm usually pretty good about knowing when I'm out. And it actually causes me problems because I double switch. Auto sprint, again, personal preference. I leave it off. You can save your joysticks a little bit if you turn it on, but double tap I would just not do. Jetpack control only really applies to Valkyrie. If you play a lot of Valk, you might want to switch that to hold, but if you're new, it shouldn't really make that much of a difference. The only reason to change it to hold is so that you can activate and deactivate your jetpack a little bit faster. Incoming damage feedback will be next. I would leave it on 3D, I believe that's the default, but if you have a hard time figuring out where people are shooting at you from, you can switch it over to both and run 2D and 3D just to have a little bit more of an indicator where they're at. On taking damage, closes deathbox or crafting menu. Leave that off. If you're gonna do shield swaps, it's gonna become a pain in your butt if it is pulling you out of death boxes all the time when you get shot at. You want that off so you can pull the shield out and then back out. Most of this other stuff you're not really gonna have to worry about. Performance display, if you're kinda techie, you wanna know what's going on, you can turn that on. For PC users, I think it's more important to see performance display, but on console you're typically going to hold about the same frame rate, and you're not going to see a whole lot of packet loss and that kind of thing. But if you like to see that sort of info, it's a pretty small box up in the top right corner. I have mine on because I like to, but it's really personal preference. That's going to be it for gameplay. We'll head over to video, and there's just a couple things to cover here. Brightness, for the most part, you're going to want to turn it up all the way. If it's too bright, or if you're on PC, I've noticed it gets too bright, but you can always adjust it. It's going to be just based on your TV, but pretty much turn it up as bright as you're willing to go. It's going to make spotting targets a lot easier. Field of view, if you're comfortable, you can max it out. If you're trying to match your settings to Call of Duty, you may want to go down to 80. That's typically what I believe Black Ops 4 runs at. Field of view ability scaling, I disable that. It just makes things a little more consistent. If it's enabled, when you go into your ultimate on like Bloodhound and I think a couple other people, you get an extra 10 degrees of field of view or something like that. But it makes gameplay a little bit more consistent if you disable it, so that's why I like to do that. Sprint view shake, you're going to want to turn to minimal. You don't want your screen shaking. You want to be able to track people, so turn that off. So that should be it for your video settings. We're going to hop over to controller, and there's just a couple things to cover before we get into the advanced look controls here. Button layout's going to be your first one. If you play tactical, you're going to want to switch to button puncher. That's going to swap your melee and your crouch button to match tactical setup. But they do have a customize option, so you can completely customize your mapping here. If you don't play tactical, or you don't want to bind all your own controls, default really is a decent setup for most people. So we're not going to mess with stick layout. If you play Southpaw or something like that, I mean, I'm sure you're used to changing your controls, you know what you're doing. Your interact and reload button you're going to want to have on tap to use and reload. That's going to be your fastest method. and in certain situations where it doesn't apply, you will have the option to hold anyways. Your crouch button is kind of a personal preference thing. If you crouch spam a lot, you might consider going over to hold just to make that faster. But for most people, I think toggle's what they're used to. For me, that's the case. So I'm going to leave it on toggle. Survival slot button, I would turn to on. That's going to make pulling out your heat shields and mobile respawns faster, and really can save you in the storm when you need that heat shield last second. L2 and R2 dead zones, I would turn them down to none. Personally, I want my gun to fire as soon as I pull the trigger, and that's going to give you your fastest fire time, your fastest input speed with the least amount of lag. Menu cursor speed, you're going to have to find what fits you. I would suggest turning it up a little bit from the default setting because I believe it's set on minimum and it's really slow, and this will affect your cursor speed in death boxes. So if you can turn it up, I would suggest turning it up just about as high as you feel comfortable going. Turning up your menu cursor speed is just going to save you time mainly in looting and armor swapping. You're going to be able to get those armor swaps out a lot faster, and that can save your butt in the game. I'm just going to say now, don't worry about almost any of this. Your movement dead zone you want on small. Same concept as your trigger, you're just going to want it to react as quickly as possible. Inverted look, if you're going to switch that, you know who you are. Vibration, I would suggest you turn off. There's two reasons for that. One being it will save battery life on your controllers, they'll last a little bit longer. And two, it'll make your aim a little bit more consistent, particularly at higher sensitivities. And before we jump into advanced look controls, I just want to say that I found the majority of this info on a Reddit thread. It has been archived, but the post was made by Ragnarok FPS. If you want to find the original thread, I will try to link it in the description, and you can also just search CoD Apex controls and you'll likely be able to find it pretty easily. Now I have changed some of my controls from what the post reads out, but for the most part it's consistent. But I will go over what the post reads so you can match up your controls as closely to Call of Duty as possible. But I have made some adjustments and I'll go over those as we go through the settings here. So first off, turn on custom look controls. You're going to want to pretty much set your values all to 0 and then we can go from there. But dead zone you're going to want around 5%. I found 5% is about as close as I can get to stick drift without causing drift on a good controller. If your controllers are kind of old or a little bit drifty, you probably will have a little bit of stick drift at 5%. You can turn that up if you want to avoid the stick drift, but if you want the most responsiveness you can get, turn it down until one value above stick drift. You can turn it down until you have stick drift consistently. Personally, I don't like to do that though, it kind of makes me sick. So that's going to be your inner dead zone, which essentially is how far you have to push the stick before it responds. Your outer threshold is just an outer dead zone. You want that as slim as possible. 2% though is what I would recommend. If you look here on this graphic, you can actually see there's an inner circle there, and that's my 5% dead zone. And that orange circle near the edge is going to be your outer threshold setting. So you can actually see that change as you adjust the values. Like that. Now my response curve I've changed pretty significantly. If you want to match Call of Duty as closely as possible, you're going to want to set that to a 14. But I've turned mine down a good amount because I like a little bit more linear feel when I'm playing. Per optic setting, for the most part, you can leave alone. If you care about changing the values at higher zoom rates or whatever, then you can do that. For most people, I think it's just fine to leave these on the default setting though. Yaw speed and pitch speed, those are going to be custom to you, and that's really determined on what sensitivity you like to play at. The easiest way to figure out your yaw speed and pitch speed is going to be based on Warzone controls, where they have 20 available sensitivity settings. The way you want to do this is essentially imagine the Apex slider is the Call of Duty slider, and you want to figure out what percentage you were at on the Call of Duty slider and match that on your Apex slider. I play at max sensitivity on Call of Duty, so I max out my sensitivity on Apex. That's pretty simple. But for example, if you play at a 15 instead of a 20, you're going to want to go that would be 375, so either 370 or 380, you can play with it and see which one you like better. 10 is going to be 250, and so on. You just have to figure out what you play at before and what you're going to play at now based on that. Just remember to always turn your pitch speed 4 ticks below your yaw speed. Turning extra yaw is going to be 170. Turning extra pitch will be 130. Ramp up time, turning ramp up time is going to be 5%, and ramp up delay is 0. You don't want any ramp up delay. I would not suggest changing that from 0. Ramp up time you can change if you like. Same with the turning extra yaw and turning extra pitch. Your ADS yaw and ADS pitch speed are going to be matched with your yaw and pitch speed above. And same with the extra yaw, extra pitch, ramp up time, and delay. Unless you like to change that for yourself, that's what Call of Duty does. Now, some of you may have noticed my target compensation is off. I 100% do not recommend doing that. And I'm going to explain why I have it set that way. And just to let you know, that's not the way I would play consistently, and if I really wanted to be competitive, that's not the setting I would keep this on. I have my target compensation turned off because I felt like my aim was slipping a little bit, so I've turned it off to basically fine-tune my aim and just get a little bit better. But I wouldn't suggest competing in any real competitive setting with target compensation off. That applies to PC and console. Make sure your melee target compensation is on and your target compensation style is on default. PC is about half the compensation strength, so you want to leave that on default so you can get full aim assist. And that should be it, people. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and sub. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. For the most part, I answer every comment as long as it's valid. So if you have any questions about controls or anything else Apex related, feel free to leave a comment. I will do my best to answer all of them and help you as best I can. Thanks for watching. Until next time, see ya.